Okay, after the rapture didn't happen on September 23rd to the 24th, Brother Joshua was given up a follow-up message by Jesus in a dream. He said, Jesus came to me in a dream and said, the 14 and 15 days will pass. Remember, the 14/15 days. This is how Joshua wrote the message on a post on YouTube. The 14/15 days will pass. Then on the 16th and 17th will be the rapture of the church. The 14 and 15 days will pass. Why? Because Passover. When does Passover happen? The 14th day of the first Hebrew month of the year, the 14th day of Abib. When was Jesus crucified? On the 14th day of the month of Abib. The Hebrew day, the biblical day, begins with the evening. So Passover began in the evening. So the 14th began with the evening, and then to the next evening, that's the 14th done. Jesus Christ was crucified in that period, in that 24-hour period, from the evening to the evening, that's the 14th. He was buried before the beginning of the next day, which began on the 15th. The evening after he was buried was the beginning of the 15th, okay? And then that goes to the 16th, to the beginning of the 16th, the next evening. That's one day in the tomb, 15th to the 16th. Then another day in the tomb, 16th to the 17th. So the beginning of the 17th is the next evening. So he's been in the tomb for 2 evenings. Okay? Then 17 Nisan, which began in the evening, goes to the morning, which is when Jesus rose. Jesus rose on 17 Nisan. So let me just repeat. It was the 14 and 15 days, or it could probably be more like the 14th and 15th day. So the 14th to the 15th, that 24-hour period, so beginning on the evening to the next evening, that's Passover. That's done. Jesus buried in the tomb. And then on the 3rd day of unleavened bread, 15th to the 16th, evening to evening, that's 1 day of unleavened bread. 16th to the 17th, that's 2 days of unleavened bread. And then 17th to the 18th, but he didn't go the full from the 17th to the 18th. From evening to evening, he rose in the morning, but he was still in the tomb for 3 nights. And technically, you could say 3 days. Jesus rose on the 3rd day of unleavened bread. 3rd day of unleavened bread. So we just need to figure out, when would Passover be this year? Well, I personally believe that the Hebrew year begins with the spring equinox, which will be on March 20 this year. Before we look at the calendar for this year, I just want to show you Exodus 12, right? The Passover lamb. So, you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel is to slaughter it at twilight. So, they slaughtered this at twilight on the 14th day, right? So that means their Passover meal didn't really begin until the night of the 15th, right? So twilight is like before sunset, basically. Before the 15th would begin, they slaughter it, and then they have their Passover meal. So then that same night, the 15th, is also when the Feast of Unleavened Bread begins. They shall eat the flesh that same night, roast it with fire, and they shall eat it with unleavened bread. So the Feast of Unleavened Bread goes for 7 days from that night, being the 15th, just after they've slaughtered the Passover lamb. Jesus died at the 9th hour of the day, which is 3 p.m. on Nisan 14. So about maybe 2 hours before sunset. So around twilight time, he gave up his breath. Basically, when they were about to slaughter the lambs, or around the same time that the lambs were being slaughtered, so they could have their Passover meal, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that evening. So there you go. Now let's look at the calendar for this year. So the spring equinox lands sometime between the 24-hour period, the evening of the 19th and the evening of the 20th. So we wouldn't count that. So our count would begin from the evening of the 20th. Not in that. We don't count this part. And that's according to the Enochian calendar. So this would be 1 whole day, 2 whole days. From the 22nd to the 23rd, 3 whole days, 4 whole days, 5 whole days, 6 whole days, 7 whole days, 8 whole days, 9 whole days, 10 whole days, 11 whole. And I just put the 31st in here, so it makes it easier for you to understand. It tracks over from the previous calendar. So this would be 12 whole days, 13 whole days. So that means the 14th day would begin on the evening of the 2nd of April and would go to the evening of the 3rd of April. So 3 p.m. the 3rd of April would have been when Jesus would have been crucified, and the lambs for the Passover meal would be slaughtered. Okay, and then the Feast of Unleavened Bread would have started shortly after. So the evening of the 3rd to the 4th would have been the first day of unleavened bread. The evening of the 4th to the 5th would have been the second day of the unleavened bread. The evening of the 5th to the 6th would have been the third day of the unleavened bread. But Jesus rises in the morning of the 3rd day. Resurrection on the morning of day 3 of unleavened bread. Okay, so this would be our 14th day here. 14th day passes. 15th day passes. And then either on the 16th or the 17th, between the 5th and the 6th, well, according to Joshua, he said 16th and 17th will be the rapture of the church. Now I just want to also add that Good Friday is going to be on April 3rd. So it happens to coincide with Passover. Really cool, right? So that's what I think anyway, that Jesus meant by 14 and 15 days will pass. Obviously, because Passover, crucifixion, and then the first night of unleavened bread. And then this would be the 16th day. And this would be the 17th day. And he rose on the 17th of Nisan, which again would be beginning in the evening of the 5th, Sunday evening, to the next evening, Monday evening, but he rose in the morning. So it would be in the morning of the 6th. So if we look at the Exodus story, Israel would have sacrificed their sheep, slaughtered them before the evening of the 3rd. They would have had their Passover meal, and then at midnight, the Lord would have come and struck Egypt. So the 15th, midnight of the 15th, which would begin in the evening, like I said, the Lord came and struck Egypt, and there was a cry. And so it was during, and then they were forced out. The Egyptians were like, "Get out, we don't want you here," because of what the Lord had done in all of Egypt. So they would have left before the 16th even began. They would have left on the 15th day, this period. But for us, according to Brother Joshua, he says 16th and 17th, so it could be either here between the 4th and the 5th, or the 5th and the 6th. Because the world is split into a 24-hour time zone, we'd be looking at the 5th and the 6th. So perhaps that's what Jesus meant. By 14, 15 days will pass, and then 16th and 17th will be the rapture of the church.